Okay. Hey everyone. I'm Donnie, and my story around what led to me interested in counseling is a really unique one. But I think I do have a lot of experience with several careers and making decisions that I think is really useful. So my story. First things first. I grew up in a really tiny town in Louisiana, a really small town. Both of my parents grew up in poverty. My mother grew up in rural Church Point, Louisiana, poverty, and my father grew up in New Orleans, in the inner city. Uh, both of them, both of them went to college. Both of them moved to a small city, Lafayette, Louisiana, and went to college there. And then 2 years into that, dropped out and had me. Because in Louisiana in the 70s, it was sort of the mentality was as long as you had some school, because all the job applications would ask if you had some college. And so as long as you could click on that, you were good. So they dropped out and chose to have a family. But because they didn't graduate college, it was very important. It was put on me from the very beginning that going to college was like the thing I had to do. Okay. My so uh, as luck would have it, well, my mother worked her whole life at a university. As soon as she got into college, she got a job at the university, as a working as a night hostess in a women's dormitory, and so she kept that job her entire life. And so, the assumption was because she was an employee there, I would get a free college tuition also. Okay, so that right there is part of my college plans. When my parents had college set up as like the thing. Okay, for me and my brother. And then I ended up getting into so my mother pushed education the whole way through. When I was 5, 6, I got put into special education classes, or what's called gifted and talented classes. That I had that all through up until high school. I got to get all kinds of special lessons on things and special attention that I didn't get otherwise. Um, and then I recall high school came, and I got into music. I got into music. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to learn violin, and I was really into classical music. And my parents, who, like I said, given the background they come from, classical music was just, some out there thing for them, or we could say something white people would do. And so they didn't really get that at all. And so I got very little support. To be really honest with you, they laughed at me when I said I wanted to learn how to play the violin. And I was so pissed about that. I was so pissed about that the next year when I started high school, I walked in and saw a baby grand piano in my chorus room, and I decided that day I was going to learn how to play the piano. And so for 2 years, I skipped lunch and PE to teach myself how to play the piano. I eventually got a book. I learned all the notes. I started off with the note D because D stood for Donovan, and I figured the whole thing out. I learned fingerings. I taught myself the whole thing, and then eventually became the school accompanist, and I started working in the band department and the choral department also, and all that got me a full paid scholarship to college. Um, so I knew I wanted to be a musician. I told my parents I wanted to be a musician. I knew this from 16 onwards. This was it for me, and got no support for that at all. My family wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. That was the only choices I had. Um, and I had to go to school at the local university my mother worked for. That was that's what she wanted also. So none of that worked for me. I Well, I ended up getting a full ride scholarship to a private school, Loyola University in New Orleans. And because I got a full ride, I could do whatever I wanted. And so I moved to Louisiana, to New Orleans, and started my adult life. I didn't. What I recall in high school was when I was trying to figure out what school to go to. I had, I didn't have a person on my side really giving me a bunch of information. So I recall my principal told me one day, well, you need to have a 5-year plan. And I recall I had something of a 5-year plan: go to college and then figure out what the next thing is. And obviously college was a big deal for me since the get-go of my life. So I had a 5-year plan. But aside from that, no one had told me how to go to school. No one told me. No one helped me apply for school. My mother wanted me to go to the local university, and that was it. So everything else I did on my own. I applied to 2 other places, Loyola because my band teacher suggested it, and the Berklee School of Music in Boston because I wanted to go big and I wanted to get out of Louisiana. So I didn't get into Berklee. And I got a full ride into Loyola. And so as I'm reflecting on this right now, I really had to give it to my band teacher. Because he saw me through a lot of things. He came out as bisexual to me one day also, and he stood up for me one day when I was being bullied by another guy for being gay. He helped me through a lot of things that I didn't acknowledge at all at the time, or didn't really acknowledge until I'm explaining this to all of you. Yeah, but so I went to school for music, and then 2 years into it, 9/11 happened, and then got all into social issues, and started dealing with all sorts of issues around race as an adult Black man, and that led to me being interested in psychology. I went off, then got a master's degree from the University of Toronto in psychology. I didn't want to stay in the United States anymore once George Bush won the second presidential election. And then I was really burnt out with school. Took 2 years out of school to just be a tour guide in a park. Did a lot of communing with nature. Got into environmental issues. And then I went back to school for sociology, where I focused on environmental sociology as well as intersectionality, race, class, gender issues. And then all that led to me focusing on youth inequality as well, youth pedagogy. And so all that stuff is the stuff I do now in my career as a sociologist, as a college professor, and as someone who's going back to school to be a career counselor. The real big thing that comes up for me before I end this video is you can say a lot real quickly. 8 minutes already went by. Wow. The main thing I really want to say in this video is what I learned is I really wanted to be that adult for someone who wasn't there for me. There's so many ways that if I had gotten some of the knowledge I know now, I could have done much different things. And I want to be able to be an adult who can offer that to young people because it wasn't there for me. And that's motivating a lot of my decision making, even now at 38, all these years later, I still want to be that person. And that's definitely motivated all the things I do now as an adult, as a sociologist. And I guess the other thing is just finding your happiness, listening to your inner truth is just so important to finding your happiness, career and in life.